President Donald Trump, no longer in office, so former President Donald Trump, there's actually been a lot of reason to celebrate here in America. No longer are we ruled by the grown-up version of the boy king Joffrey Baratheon, and are now returning to a little bit of a state of normalcy, as much as we can, of course, with the mess that Biden has been left by the Trump administration. Over 400,000 dead from the coronavirus, massive recession, et cetera, et cetera. Nonetheless, the Biden administration is doing what they can to try to put out the fires, and get people, vaccinated and help to the American people, which is a good thing. But the return to normalcy will also eventually mean the return of normal U.S. foreign policy. So now I want to be very, very clear here before I get into this, okay? A Biden administration is much better than a Trump administration. I'm not trying to imply otherwise. Okay, so let's be very, very clear about this. The Trump administration has done horrific things, foreign policy-wise, as well as domestic policy-wise. And so that is an important thing. That is an important distinction to make. That said, foreign policy-wise, under Joe Biden, is also not going to be great for people living overseas, especially in places like Latin America and the Middle East. So now, while it is important to point out that things will get better in America under a Joe Biden presidency, in a lot of places it will not, as a result of certain foreign policy decisions that I can't really say are going to be the direct result of the Biden administration, but just back to the normalcy of American foreign policy overall. And Biden will just be a continuation of that. So let me give you some examples here, okay? So now, let's begin with Venezuela. Okay, something that I didn't like to see is the American stance on Venezuela, all right? So now, Democracy Now! Has reported that Tony Blinken, Biden's nominee for Secretary of State, said that the new administration will continue to recognize Juan Guaido as the president of Venezuela rather than their democratically elected president, Nicolas Maduro. So that's a continuation from the Trump administration, who also supported that Venezuelan coup. Guaido is, of course, a right-wing strongman, and like him or not, Maduro is the elected official, elected president, elected leader of Venezuela, and it is running a generally left-wing government. So now, Blinken said that the U.S. would continue to impose harsh sanctions, which have crippled the Venezuelan economy during the middle of a pandemic. In fact, in January 2020, Venezuelan opposition leader Juan Guaido stormed the parliament with a group of lawmakers in an effort to forcefully swear himself in as the country's leader. Now that, of course, sounds kind of familiar with what Trump attempted to do. Tried to take over the country by force. And the Trump administration had ironically, of course, supported Guaido's efforts to do the same. Guaido ended up getting pushed out by police with tear gas outside of government buildings and failed to consolidate power since the unsuccessful coup attempt in 2019. Now, these ongoing sanctions that have been placed on Venezuela by the Trump administration have crippled the Venezuelan economy. Research from the Center for Economic and Policy Research estimates that as many as 40,000 Venezuelans have died as a result of American sanctions. So what we are doing right now is killing people through sanctions. And it looks as though our foreign policy will continue where Trump left off. Now, again, the Trump administration favored that coup and also supported, there were plans to help and invade Venezuela as well. I'm glad that didn't come to fruition under the Trump administration. The Biden administration, I don't think, would be as bold to do that or to attempt something like that. But at the same time, we're still continuing the Trump administration's, plans of, facing Venezuela the same way that we've always faced other left-wing democratically elected governments in South America. So now, it's disappointing, as I said, but not surprising. Now, we also have the Middle East. All right, so the Middle East, Biden was a supporter of Bush's war on terror. Okay, so that means, more drones, more bombs, things like that. And its continuation under the Obama administration. Now, although, and I'm going to give him big credit for this, and I have given him big credit for this, Biden wants to get the Iran deal back into place. I think that's a great idea. I think we should absolutely do that. I think it was a huge, huge mistake for Trump to rip it up. And in doing so, he may have actually doomed the Biden administration's efforts to try to get back into it. So that's not good. But that said, we're still going to see support for harsh sanctions on Iran, as well as support for the right-wing government of Israel. So the reason that I'm against a lot of sanctions, because it ends up hurting regular people and not the people that are in charge, not the people that are in power. Okay. Now, as far as drone strikes, the Biden administration continues to also be in favor of the war in Yemen, support for Saudi Arabia. Not in so much as a way of President Trump, again, who had more of a personal relationship with Mohammed bin Salman, and may actually also go after, hopefully, bin Salman and the Saudi government for the murder of Jamal Khashoggi. But at the same time, we're still continuing material support for the war in Yemen. And until I see, of course, the Biden administration speak out against that, that's a strike against him in my book. All right. Now, that said, drone strikes. Look, the Biden administration is probably going to reel back on drone strikes. That'll be a good thing. He will definitely reverse, I could see him, the policy of the Trump policy of targeting the families of terrorists that haven't done anything wrong, and bring it back to being the Obama drone program. But that's not good either. Obama's drone program was also pretty horrific. It actually led to many innocent people being killed, weddings being bombed, etc. Again, Trump has taken the existing drone program under Obama and made it 3 times worse. Many, many more civilian deaths that were caused by our drone program. And so, again, reeling it back to where it was before is better, but it's also not good. So keep that in mind, all right? And so, again, what Biden is doing is really pulling back the worst excesses, extremes of the Trump administration and bringing it back to essentially foreign policy under Obama, which, again, as I pointed out, during the Obama administration, I felt was problematic. And so going back to that normal, I don't think is a good thing. I think it ends up being what we often call polite imperialism. Okay? As a leftist, I'm wholly against imperialism of any stripe, because, again, it tends to kill or exploit people in other countries for American gain, for, the gain of, like, corporations, for example. And so pointing out how it's wrong under any president, whether it be a Democrat or Republican. Republican administrations tend to have even more ghoulish type of foreign policy, foreign policies or foreign policy goals. Under Democrats, it's not been great either. And so both parties tend to be imperialist when it comes to their foreign policy objectives, and that's not good. I think foreign affairs, and the reason that we don't do a lot about it is I think that foreign affairs, are something that not a lot of Americans tend to think about. So that's unfortunate, because I think this needs to be involved in the broader conversation, especially now that the danger of Trump is basically over. We should try not to be the danger in the world, at least in those developing parts of the world, in places like South America, places like, the Middle East and things like that. We should not prop up right-wing dictatorships in those areas, just because they're corporate friendly and friendly to America, or like enforce sanctions that tend to harm people, as opposed to actually harming corrupt world leaders that do go after and harm their own citizens. And so we really need to have a conversation about how to do better foreign policy that doesn't, continue the stain of American imperialism. And it is quite disappointing, unfortunately, to see the Biden administration their normal go back to basically that. If you enjoyed this video, please give us a like and share with your friends. You can subscribe and help out the channel by becoming a patron. It's patreon.com/Jeff Waldorf, or you can become a channel member as well by hitting the join button below.